Okay.
All right, good morning. This is John Earl with SoCal Water Wars. This is my podcast. My guest today is Max Gomberg, who served as a conservation manager for the California State Water Resources Control Board for 10 years under Governors Jerry Brown and Gavin Newsom. Working there, he faced challenges from two historic droughts, climate change, and the pandemic. Gomberg resigned in July of 2022 in a letter addressed to everyone. In it, he warned of dark and uncertain times due to rising fascism and decreasing habitability on Earth from human-caused climate change. He accused Governor Newsom of blocking policies that would promote the reasonable use of water and environmental justice by reallocating resources to programs that actually increase public health and safety. Since then, Max became secretary and a senior policy advisor for California Water Impact Network, which fights for more equitable water rights and policies and protection of water and fisheries as public trust resources. So did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So, okay, just to lay a little groundwork here, last night, somebody sent me a clip of a newscast announcing here in San Diego that water rates and sewer rates are, if this proposal is approved by the San Diego City Council for the city of San Diego, water rates will go up cumulatively 92% over the next 6 years by 2031. And a lot of that has to do with the rising costs, the rising water rates from the San Diego County Water Authority, which has a lot of debt to pay off because of the ocean desalination plant in Carlsbad, which has become an albatross around the necks of its 26 member agencies, some of whom have opted to leave the water authority, and others who are flatly refusing to raise their water rates of the pass-on rates to their own constituents, such as Padre Dam and so on. So this is the situation we're in, and the water authority is being faced with the demands to cut its staff and maybe even eliminate itself altogether. So since you resigned in your work at CWIN, you've come out with two studies which essentially analyze the business model of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, which is the umbrella, kind of the mother or umbrella group for bringing imported water from Colorado and Northern California to 19 million people in Southern California and 6 counties there. And you challenge that business model, and in particular, the pet project of the Governor Newsom, for called the Delta Conveyance Project, which would construct a tunnel going underneath the San Francisco estuary, and a 45-mile long tunnel, and to bring water down to Central Valley farmers and ostensibly urban water users in Southern California. And the price tag for that the Metropolitan Water District, that the state estimated at first was 16 million. Then after your first report, they went up to 20 billion, sorry. And your most recent report came out in July of this summer, I believe. And it says that the cost estimate now is actually, according to that study, and expert testimony that was given under oath before the State Water Quality Control Board, between 60 billion and 100 billion dollars. Okay, with all the other projects that the basic costs that MWD and other water districts have for infrastructure, and then the proposed Carson wastewater treatment plant that would be right now, I think the latest estimate was 6 billion or 7 billion for that over the next 10 years or so. So first of all, MWD has been saying that it's changing its business model, and they have their camp for water program, now I forget exactly what climate action management program for water. And so that it entails that business model change, but I'm not sure what that model, how that model has changed. Has it changed any for the better? And where do we stand now with future costs for rising costs for electricity and water, and the way MWD in particular is running things?
There's a lot going on here. I'm going to try to unpack some of it.
Okay.
Let's start with MWD. Right, MWD is the largest wholesaler of water in the state. That is right. They bring water in from the north, from the Delta, and then from the east, from the Colorado River, and they sell it to regional agencies. So that's like San Diego County Water Authority and the Central Basin Municipal Water District and a whole host of others. Those entities then in turn sell it to retail agencies. Those are the cities and special districts that actually deliver water to people's homes and businesses and charge rates. So there's this sort of intermediary approach. And the model for all of this is that the sales of the water would provide enough revenue to keep all of this going. Metropolitan sells water to these other regional wholesalers. From that, they make enough money to maintain their sort of region-wide operations, maintain the pipelines and other infrastructure. The regional wholesalers, like San Diego County Water Authority, the idea was, well, they're looking after their county or area. They get enough money from selling the water to the retail agencies to maintain those sort of coordinated operations, if you will, and investments. And then the retailers, the cities and the special districts, they sell to people, right, and businesses, and their model is as long as they keep the rates at a level that people can pay, they can manage to cover all their expenses of providing retail water service, right? That's all the pipes and pumps and tanks and the the chemicals and the electricity it takes to deliver treated water to homes and businesses. That model is fundamentally broken for a couple reasons. The first is climate change, which has dramatically increased the variability and overall reduced the amount of water coming in from both these major imported sources, both the Delta in Northern California and the Colorado River system, which is particularly stressed right now in the Southwest. And because of that, right, the metropolitan and the regional wholesalers like San Diego County Water Authority started looking at local water supplies, everything from recycled water to desalination, increased conservation, better management of local groundwater, stormwater capture and reuse. That shift is a good thing in terms of diversification of sources. The problem comes in where the financial management has not matched the reality. The whole thing, the whole foundation of this system was predicated on basically increasing sales. That there would be sufficient demand for water to drive sales that would allow all of these water systems, all of these agencies to continue to function at their sort of baseline budget levels, and that simply hasn't been the case.
So why has the demand been going down from the consumers?
So again, demand has dropped for a few different reasons. One is because consumers have been responsive to the messaging that the climate is changing, there are more droughts, and there's a need to conserve water. And people in Southern California in particular have responded very well to that message over 3 decades now, but particularly over the last 2 decades, where we've had more frequent and severe droughts in succession. And overall water use just is down, despite the fact that the population has grown. And the water agencies have not sort of acclimated to this reality. Many of them have been living in a world where eventually the demand will go back up and the sales will go back up, and then they will be able to balance their budgets. And it's simply not happening. And that's why now finally you've got agencies like Metropolitan with the Camp for Water process looking at, okay, we need to face this reality, and we need to figure out what we can do about it. While all this has been happening, due to underinvestment, inflated demand estimates and revenue estimates, and a host of investments that were expected to be covered exclusively by ratepayers, rates have now gone up through the roof, right? We've seen double digit, up to, in San Diego County, almost triple digit rate increases hitting now due to all of these things happening at the same time. It's truly a massive failure of planning. It's a failure of foresight, and it's a failure of understanding what people could really afford. In addition to a lack of support from the state and federal governments specific to the affordability crisis. And
so what about what if I could just ask this? So what about the ideological issues involved here? Because among the supporters of the Delta Conveyance Project, for example, and you see this in the meetings of these water association, these get-togethers of the water buffaloes, I guess, and like Orange County Water Summit comes yearly, and the Municipal Water District of Orange County's annual dinners and stuff, and all the water industry people come there, and they're always professing the abundance theory, the abundance ideology, that there's an abundance of water, and that the solution to lack of water is to just produce more water, to just keep more ways of getting that water, and just like the one water board director some years back said, you have to take that hose from my dead hands or something like that. That was so that seems to be the slant. And you talked when you resigned, you were talking about I think you were referring to maybe MAGA-fascism or something like that. And how does all this idea that we can just keep importing water, and building more infrastructure, sites and reservoirs, you can talk about too, that it seems to be an ideological approach rather than a reality-based approach.
It's absolutely an ideological approach, and we're seeing it play out in extreme form right over this past year, in all kinds of ways. But let's talk about the sort of direct analogy, right? We've got a federal administration right now that is back to the kind of territorial expansion mode that was, right, something that used to just be taught as, oh, that was before, that was this idea of manifest destiny, right, and sort of that happened during the colonial period. Well, the colonial period is clearly not over. You've got people, angling to take over Denmark. I mean, it would be beyond absurd if it weren't so real and scary. And that same mentality, as you mentioned, has played out in the development of water supplies in California, and the unwillingness of the people who control the water to look at the consequences of their actions. Like you said, it's always just been, we'll take more, we will deliver more, we will build more, and if that destroys some ecosystem elsewhere, if that means that people can't afford it, low-income households can't afford it, if that means that that we have to run roughshod over our political ideological opponents, no problem.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to do.
So in 2021, there was supposedly going to be a change in that philosophy, and that was with the appointment by the board of directors of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California of Adel Haj Khalil as the new general manager, who brought forth this. I'm not saying he invented it, but he certainly pioneered it, this one water approach. And one water was the name of the game. And that was an approach of local and regional cooperation and sharing, inclusivity, and didn't actually outright oppose the Delta project, for example, but he kind of stepped back from it and said, we need to examine all other methods first, and see what just check everything out first. And he was narrowly approved by the board and of appointed directors in a weighted vote that's based on property value and that kind of thing. And then there was a rebellion within, and I've written about it extensively there, and people can read about it. I won't go into all the details, but basically due process was thrown aside, and he was ousted without cause, but he was ousted. Now all the references to one water in the literature put out by MWD seems to have vanished, except for the name of the one committee there. And this whole process was a very nasty process. Not a single water board director stood up to that in public, so is there any of the values that were in one water and supposed to be in Camp 4 as well, Camp 4 water, any of those in your view still exist at Metropolitan Water District, or has it just been totally regressive?
From my perspective, that remains to be seen. They have recently appointed a new permanent general manager, and Shivaji Deshmukh, and his background is in recycled water. He served at Inland Empire and at West Basin before that, and was a big supporter of recycled water development. So, which is one of the sort of core local supplies that is encompassed in the one water concept. Now, the general manager is not the board. The board ultimately makes the decisions about the direction of the agency. So I don't know. We're going to see how things play out. But ultimately, getting back to this question of where are public dollars being invested, the issue with the proposed Delta Tunnel, which, by the way, the reason that the economists who studied this, who are renowned environmental economists, came up with the $60 to $100 billion figure, is because, as with all mega infrastructure projects, there are so many things that happen along the way that push up costs. Financing issues, engineering issues. You can have sort of things that cause delays, and that all pushes the costs up. I mean, every single large infrastructure project, we've seen this with the ongoing high-speed rail development in the state, and the rebuilding of any major bridge or tunnel, anything. So it's clear that the state's $20 billion estimate was way under. even
Well,
though they
why
had.
such a variation between the estimates of 60 billion and 100 billion? What accounts for that? That's quite a wide range there.
It is a wide range. I mean, a lot of it is sort of uncertainty over timeline. A lot of it has to do with financing costs. If you think about floating bonds for that amount in a sort of uncertain bond market, especially now with again a federal administration that seems just hell bent on imposing some version of 21st century Nazism. And so I think when you look at the difference between, right, 1% here, 1% there over 30, 40 years for a project this big, that's where you get up into billions of dollars of variation.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how we got to this position that we're in today, and I'd like to look at this article a little bit. Maybe you can talk about it. That's on your CWIN website, and it's about the so-called Monterey agreements that took place in 1992, I guess, or 1994, and it's a rather sordid affair. Can you? And it kind of explains like who has the real power behind water management in the state of California. I think that's the purpose there. So go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, and I will in just a sec. I just want to wrap on the tunnel.
Sure.
It's the cost estimate. I mean, whether it's 60, whether if it gets built, whether it's 60 billion or 80 billion, or even if it's 40 billion, it sort of doesn't matter in the sense of we cannot afford, right? We're already seeing these huge rate increases. There is no way that there is enough ability to pay for a huge tunnel plus these local water sources, the recycled water build out, the stormwater. All of the above is not a strategy that actually works because it is not affordable. So fundamentally, this decision point is about how the state and the powers that be are responding to climate change. The tunnel is about trying to maintain the status quo in the face of climate change, right? Oh, well, the climate's changing. We're just going to take more water to make up for the gap. And the governor actually has been very clear about that in his plans and his messaging. Oh, the state is losing its water supply, and we're going to throw all kinds of money out there to try to maintain the level of water supply and use we have now.
Is there any real difference or any daylight between the policies, water policies promoted by President Trump and Governor Newsom? Actually, I mean, in the future, crusading knight in shining armor in his image presidential candidate, the policies about sending water to the Central Valley and all that are pretty much the same, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot of difference. I mean, I do think, I'm no fan of Governor Newsom. He at least in the northwest part of the state, right, so supported the project to remove the Klamath River dams and support ecosystem there. I don't think that had the Trump administration had the ability to block that, they would have tried. Yeah. So they're not exactly the same, but when it comes to the sort of the big agriculture and the donors and the corporate interests that really control these big water projects in the Central Valley and on the Colorado River, there's not a whole lot of difference.
Okay.
Because those people write checks. Those people are equal opportunity influencers. They're happy to maintain their control over the Democratic Party in California and happy to get what they want out of the national Republicans, if you will.
Okay, and I'm going to get back to whether in a few minutes after we go talk about the Monterey Agreement there, if the board of directors of the largest water district has the courage, has the wherewithal in what I think is a very transactional atmosphere there to do it, really be functional in standing up to any of this. But let's talk about the Monterey agreements, because I think that's fascinating and appalling at the same time. So go ahead and give us a rundown on that.
Yeah, and it's an important part of how we got here too, because this is about many decades of developments and decisions that got us to a place where now it's crisis mode. Right now it's 90% rate increases. Now it's proposals to build huge tunnels. The Monterey agreements is fundamentally at its core a story about the power of big corporate ag to maintain the water supply and subsidy, and shift all of the costs back onto the public sector, back to the environment. So the State Water Project, there are two big water projects in California that move water from north to south and east to west. The federal project is actually the bigger one. That serves almost all agriculture. Small percent goes to a few cities. The State Water Project serves Southern California, along with agriculture in Kern County and some other areas. And that project, when it was built, there were agreements put into the contracts about what happens during times of shortage, and who gets access to water under what conditions. In the late 70s, there was an intense drought, 76, 77. It was the first time that project really barely delivered any water. It freaked out both the cities and the farmers about, well, what if this project can't deliver? Where are we going to get our water from? And that was sort of the first taste of, oh, we've got a problem here. And then a decade later, starting in 1987, there was another drought. That drought lasted 5 years. And having learned from the first experience a decade ago, and having seen that, the ag barons of the state realized that in these drought periods, they might get totally cut off, and they would lose a lot of money and be in a weak position. So what the Monterey agreements were secret negotiations that took place in sort of at the end of that second drought period in the beginning of the 90s, to rewrite the rules so that the control of the water, both from the groundwater storage and the water flowing through the canal, would be more favorable to agriculture. And ultimately, the big outcome of the Monterey Agreement is that agriculture controls now the Kern Water Bank, which is one of the biggest groundwater storage areas in the San Joaquin Valley, and they also don't get cut off immediately when there are shortages in what that project can deliver. So it was really a huge win for, again, big corporate ag interests, and the main loser, as usual in California water, is the environment. But it also put the urban areas in Southern California at a disadvantage as well. So that's the main takeaway from the Monterey Agreement. And now you fast forward several decades, and again, the agricultural interests are happy to support this tunnel. They don't want to have to pay for it. They want Southern California ratepayers to pay for it. But they they are in a much stronger position than they otherwise would have been, but for these agreements.
So let me ask, okay, the current water bank now, does an MWD store water there, so to speak, or paper water? Okay, can you explain what paper water is? Because that's in this article too. What is paper water?
Right. So, right, the actual water is how much water is flowing through the rivers, how much water is in this reservoir, how much water is under the ground in this location. Paper water refers to the series of contracts and rights and this entire legal system that has been built up to allocate and determine who gets how much water when and who pays what. And the paper water far exceeds the actual water that exists.
How is that? How can that be? That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know a lot about economics, but that doesn't make much sense.
So the way that these contracts have been drawn up, mostly they have a maximum, right? You can take up to however much, right? When we talk about water in California, we talk about acre feet, which is right. It's how much water does it take to flood an area of an acre to 1 foot of depth. So imagine a football field, roughly that's about an acre, right? Covered in one foot of water. It's over 700,000 gallons. That's what we talk about in terms of volumes. It's a lot. And then when we're talking about volumes to Southern California, particularly volumes to agriculture, we're talking about thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, in some cases, millions of acre feet. These are huge volumes of water. These contracts and these rights say you can take up to X thousand acre feet or some figure. And when you add all those up, it's far beyond the amount of water that ever actually exists. And they were made in a time when people thought there would be more water, when people thought that there was no need to provide any water for the environment. And so we've just developed this, and they've never been checked. And we have this incredibly antiquated and fundamentally racist system of water rights, where the people that are sort of termed first in time, first in right. So the earlier you filed your claim, the more senior your rights are, which means that you don't get cut, basically. Everyone else gets cut before you. So the miners who showed up during the gold rush and staked claims, people who displaced Native American populations, have the oldest rights and the most power in this system.
So we're way behind we're in a different century essentially, and water management techniques. But what are the consequences, the real life consequences of the paper water concept? I mean, it seems like you've got all this paper water, but then you have a crisis, and the paper water doesn't help. So am I right about that? I mean, that could be a catastrophe, couldn't it?
Yeah, and we've seen this actually play out every few years when we have a succession of dry years, right? California, even prior to climate change, right? It has a Mediterranean climate. It goes through dry swings and wet swings. And during the dry swings, there's not enough water for all of the uses. There's not enough water for the amount of agriculture going on. There's not enough water for the cities. There's not enough water for the environment. And the environment always gets shortchanged. That and the way that relates to the paper water is that while things are getting dry, year one, year two, people, the decision makers are still allowing the agricultural water districts, metropolitan, to take as much water as they can. They're delivering as much as they can, and then all of a sudden, it's year two, it's year three, it's a severe drought, and now we have to cut back. And then we get, but my right says I get this much, right? And then we get into these complex proceedings about who has to get cut and how much. And what generally ends up happening is that every time this happens, the state and the federal government that operates the system of pumps and canals comes to the regulators and says, oh, you need to waive the rules. You need to waive the environmental protections, waive the water quality rules, so that we can continue delivering the water that we've promised, and make sure that there's not too much salty water coming up through the bay into the delta, because there's not enough fresh water flowing down the rivers. Well, why is that happening? Because they've drained all the water out of the reservoirs, right? They've taken too much water out of the rivers over the preceding years, and now we have crisis. And it happened. We've seen this happen time and time again.
So the farmers, the Central Valley farmers, and people who attend these summits, water summits in Orange County and elsewhere, are always talking about the environment gets a huge percentage of the water. And I didn't understand that. I thought instead of saying 80% of the water goes to agriculture, and to me that means the water that's available in the system, all that we take out of the environment. But they say, oh no, but the environment's getting I don't know what they said, 40 or 50% or whatever the figure is. I can't remember what it was, a huge amount, and that's like they're being robbed by the environment. And so. But then they also say now that we talk about the need for more infrastructure, like I mentioned earlier. The solution to not having enough water is to just bring more water. And so, how much? I mean, and they say, if we don't get this project done, this Delta conveyance project done with the tunnel and all that, we may go out of business. That's a big complaint of theirs. They won't be able to produce the crops, and then that will be an economic. It's implied that's an economic catastrophe, and the bread basket, one of the biggest. I think maybe the biggest bread basket. I don't know if it's actually bread, but crop basket, I guess, for the nation and for other places in the world. So what about the threat, the economic threat to the farmers, whether they be big ag or I know there's a class difference literally between the big ag, the corporate ag, and the smaller farmers and all that, and they have differences of opinions about things. But what about their right to a livelihood and the economic benefits to the state of California? And former General Manager Jeffrey Keitlinger talks a lot about that, and too. And so what about that?
Yeah, well, there's so much bad faith in all of those arguments. It's we could spend a long time debunking all of it, but let's start with the sort of broad economics. California has one of the 5 largest economies in the world measured by gross domestic product, and that's because of things like the tech industry and the entertainment industry and tourism and a lot of advanced, manufacturing and other, real estate. California has a pretty diversified economy. Agriculture overall is a very small percentage of the state's total economy. So reducing agriculture, when people talk about, the economic impacts at the total sort of macroeconomic level, there is no truth to that. It's a complete fabrication. Agriculture overall, even when you count associated services, is 2-3% of the state economy. So that's not the issue. The issue is that in certain parts of the state, where agriculture really is a dominant industry, that if you cut it back, you're going to see economic impacts. Certain parts of the San Joaquin Valley and the Imperial Valley, and or even the Sacramento Valley. And the real question becomes, well, whose interests do we need to maintain? Right? It's always about it's always about looking at sort of who's benefiting, who's paying the costs, and what are the alternatives. We could have different economic models for regions that really are using unsustainable amounts of water right now for agriculture. And again, you made the point, right? Farming's not a monolith. There's a big difference between, the small family farm growing vegetables, and, huge corporate agriculture businesses, right, that get investments from hedge funds, putting in just thousands of acres of nut trees or, table grapes.
What's wrong with nuts and table grapes and all that? What's the problem with that? I eat them too. You probably do sometimes too. That's a food supply, a legitimate food supply, isn't it, or not?
Well, sure. I mean, I like those too, right? I like grapes. I like wine. I like nuts. The problem is the scale. And let's start with the grapes, right? Grapes are grown all over the world, right? There's no unique need to grow grapes in California. Of course, we have some of the famed wine grape producing regions, and we're not talking about, right, when we talk about the need to rebalance water supply, we're not talking about eliminating agriculture in California. We're not talking about cutting agriculture back 50-75%. We're talking about 20-30%, so that we can have a resilient ecosystem, so that people in San Diego don't have to pay 90% rate increases. That's what we're talking about. And we're talking about cutting profits to companies that are making so much money, it's hard to express, right, that they're part of these huge conglomerates. We're not talking about basic food security and small family farmers. That's a really important.
We're talking about maybe allowing a Tulare Lake to actually come back and like it was before Europeans came and settled there to some substantial degree. Talking about something like that. And that go to the groundwater. When I speak to the groundwater issue there, the overdrawing from the groundwater, the sinking, that's. I was watching another podcast with a groundwater scientist, who studies the groundwater and all that. And he says that's the immediate crisis, more so even than climate change, although it's related, because we're literally all over the world running out of groundwater supplies that are not polluted and so on. And so and what about restoring the ecosystem as a way of regenerating the water cycle and all that? Right. And that would relate to having a larger Tulare Lake for one example and all that.
Right. And these are all choices, right? We could be, as a society, investing in that. We could be investing in having a healthy and robust populations of salmon and other species that rely on the rivers and Tulare Lake, and making it so that our inland economies are more diversified and people can find jobs in other sectors beyond agriculture. But that's a choice as a society, right? And we would have to make that choice. And the politicians, the people who control water, don't want to do it. They are beholden to large checks that come from corporate agriculture. They have bought into the ideology of economic growth requires more water delivery. And they have a personal stake too. I mean, there are perks you get from sitting on these boards. You get to go to fun conferences. You get to feel important. There are reasons.
Aqua, the
that,
Association
yeah.
of California Water Association, or whatever, something like that. That's a favorite one, which is a violation of the Brown Act too, by the way, because you have appointees from the water district sit on there and vote on insurance policies and other things like that. And anyways, but okay. So are they? What you talked about checks? What checks? How is this money being from Big Ag being filtered? And then the corollary to, or the add-on to that is are these is Big Ag getting subsidized? And how much they actually pay for the water? But we're talking about the check, how the money flow here influences things.
Yes. They get tremendous subsidies. And again, the subsidies flow in various ways, from subsidizing the infrastructure that delivers the water, to how much they pay for it, to ways that they can get tax write-offs. So subsidies abound. Let's start there. But in terms of how
they get that subsidy, and then they sell us back water, like in the Imperial, the IID, Imperial Irrigation District, and they sell it back to us, water that they got for real cheap, and so that we can and we buy it, and they want to raise the prices up, so that's the price that we have to pay for them conserving water when they're growing alfalfa and stuff like that. I don't know. I mean, go ahead.
I mean, that's essentially it, and that's the same thing, right? That's the same problem that arose out of the Monterey Agreement with control of the Kern Water Bank, right? That they now can control and sell that water back at a profit. And it's fundamentally, the way I think about this is, look, we have a system that was based on who made the first claim, but at some point in a society you have to reevaluate. We don't give people patents for anything that they produce that are indefinite, right? Generally, you get 100 years or something like that, right? And then someone else can come and say, hey, I want to build off of that thing. But what we've done with the water system is say, whomever made a claim back in 1872, and because of that, you have tremendous power and control. It's not good for society. It's only good for those people, and it's a real problem. And so,
what about the California Constitution that says we have a right to water, and then and also the reasonable use of water? I mean, how can that belong to? I mean, isn't that a contradiction there? Has anyone tried to fall through in court on that issue?
Yeah, and I expect more people will, but I think, right, we could do a whole nother nother podcast just on the courts, sure, and how the different laws get interpreted, and why that particular provision of the Constitution hasn't delivered the way that maybe some of us would hope. But yes, I mean, there are good laws in California, including the state constitution, that says, yeah, we've got scarce water. We need to, make sure that it's not being wasted, that it's being used reasonably, that the environment, the delta are being protected. And yet, right, those laws exist, and yet, right, here we are with a ecosystem in crisis, people pushing for yet another huge infrastructure project to take more water out of the system. So it's clear that we're gonna need some additional changes, right? Whether it's from the courts, from local leadership, the incoming governor, but we're gonna need some. We're going to need some major changes to get out of this spiral, because the reality is that.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. Finish up.
The reality is that climate change is happening. It's going to continue happening. And the real question is, how are we dealing with it as a society, and whose interests are we prioritizing when we develop ways to adapt? Are we prioritizing the same people who've been subsidized and have made massive profits? Or are we going to prioritize the communities that are historically and still marginalized and increasingly under attack from the neo-Nazis running the country?
So I like to finish up in a few minutes about what we can do about that. But first, I'd like to talk about some of that. We haven't talked about the environmental issues of the Delta Conveyance Project and so on. And I was watching one of those an Orange County Water Summit from last year, and they were talking about, and this was, the people there were MWD board members. Moderator was Stephen Fessel. Then there were consultants there, and then there was Randall Nudek, and I'm not sure I pronounced that right. Apologize if I didn't. Manager of the Bay Delta programs for the Metropolitan Water District. And in that, in one of the sessions, they were talking about the new science, the new scientific discovery about how they can restore the estuary there, okay, the delta, and instead of, I try to make it short, but instead of, according to the United States Geological Survey study, it's a mistake to let out more water into the delta, and because something to do with mixing, and that really what happens if they don't put the mixing of the salt water from the sea and the fresh water, and if they don't put that water in there from which could go to agriculture or urban areas or whatever, then or to Sites Reservoir or wherever it might be, then the salt sinks down to the bottom, and then the delta smelt can thrive up there. That's the new scientific discovery, and I have no idea whether that's true or not. But so therefore, that's good, because if we restore the delta, then we can have not fewer regulations, they're careful to say, but not more regulations, and then they can divert the water to better uses, for human uses and so on. So that this is a great new discovery and so on, and that's what they were talking about there. And so, do you know anything about that? Can you comment on that at all?
I mean, my comment on that is, right, there's a parable. I'm going to butcher it, but it basically goes, right. It's impossible to convince a man to believe something that's not in his financial interest to believe, right? And right, we've got people who are just out of their, I don't know, who are living in an alternate reality, running the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services right now. And they're saying, we don't need vaccines. We don't need to add fluoride to water. I mean, it is just the most anti-science, quackery at the highest levels of government. And again, they're living in an alternate reality of disinformation. There's an ideological project there. And when I hear about, people saying, oh, well, we can still save the delta and take more water out of it, it's the same factor at play. It's people being unwilling to confront the reality, and the reality is very well established for anyone who's willing to sit down and read an actual scientific paper, including studies that have been published by the state itself, about the fact that the only way to ensure that this ecosystem survives and thrives is to provide it with more fresh water. That is the bottom line. Is without the flow, you do not have a viable ecosystem. So it's just it's another way people are willing to delude themselves in order to protect their interests.
Okay, so the people who are in charge of our water districts don't seem to me to be the kind of people who are going to do anything about it, and the you know the ways that you're talking about. And I give an example. I waited a long time to write about it, but there was a meeting when this Orange County Water Forum where they invite people. Usually, all these gatherings are usually right or far right leaning, or maybe more subtle sometimes than other times. But they had, for example, when Adel Hajj-Khalil was appointed, they had him there, and it was kind of interesting response that he got, I think, but some kind of subtle things. But in June, they had Troy Edgar, the assistant secretary or assistant the one in charge of the Department of Homeland Security. And this is at a time when a lot had already been going on for 6 months since the Trump administration came in, with brutalizing immigrants and so on, and climate change, eviscerating any mention of climate change in any federal program. And you, as you know, and I think most of the public knows, that climate change is we're talking about adapting to it and so on, is a sin, and it's likely to affect funding. So is any kind of DEI policies, which the DEI is an issue that the Metropolitan Water District has been struggling with for decades. And that was part of Adel Hajj-Khalil's mission, was to write that, and talking about inclusivity and so on. And so they went on and fawned over this guy, and who was used to be a local politician, Troy Edgar, in Orange County. So they all knew him. There was a buddy thing there. No mention of, and they talked about how wonderful it was to have him there in light of the current national security situation. And by that, I have to, the only thing I can think of is that they're talking about the immigrant invasion and so on. Now, nobody, at least in the recorded video that we saw, and these meetings are mostly water people, water directors from various water districts and consultants and so on, like that, are there. It's not open to the general public, really, because it costs $160. It's not something the typical water ratepayer. It's really a cluster, what kind of thing. And so not a single question challenging anything that this guy said, and not asking him about any of the issues that were really coming forth from the Department of Homeland Security upon the constitutional issues and the human issues and so on. Nothing about it. Nothing talking about Department of Homeland Security is in charge of FEMA. It's a national security issue. Previously, under that agency was climate change. How to deal with climate change. That's gone. That's totally gone. That's totally against and contrary to everything that's supposed to be in camp for water, and much more so One Water, the original version of it. And the current form of camp for is watered down issues. They still talk about equity, but it's watered down, and considerably. But anyways, so not nobody talks about it. I presume there are progressive. I know there are some progressive people on the board of Met, but they don't talk about that. They never raise a single eyebrow in public about the way that Adel Hajj-Khalil was canned, which I went into in great depth in a series of articles, facilitated by the board of director, the chairman of the board, Don Ortega. and violating due process for the accuser in his harassment case, as well as the general Haj Khalil, and of course the accuser did the same thing, by leaking it to the news media and all this, and then he was not found. The investigation found nothing whatsoever, but he was still canned after a year of being put on leave for not for cause, just because they didn't want him there. I looked at the vote tally for that was overwhelmingly a majority. And there were a few progressives on there who did not vote for it, but none of them spoke out. None of them spoke out at any public meetings or anything. Something you would expect to see maybe at your local city council meeting a lot of times. There's kind of go along to get along there too, but not like there's a lot more debate on issues there. Water boards, it's like, there's this understanding that you don't speak out. How can we rely on those people none of whom are elected, none of whom are they're accountable to factional politics only, and their own little transactional issues on the side sometimes. We're in bad hands there. What can we do about that?
Well, again, we could have a whole longer discussion about how we organize elections and moving to ranked choice voting for these type of elections and right and contribution caps and all of it. We have so many problems with the way that what's left now of democracy in this country is structured, but I think, yeah, that's best left for another time. But the bottom line is what you said, right? That there is a sort of herd mentality that takes place at these water agencies often, and there's not a lot of willingness to do anything other than go along and sort of just do what's always been done.
Well, what about changing? Okay, let's say just for one example.
Hey, Judd, can I just? I was supposed to be.
You're running out of time.
I was supposed to be on another meeting 10 minutes ago. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should. Okay. Well. Okay. All right. Well, we'll save that. We'll save that for another time.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'll let you finish off with if you have anything you want to finish off with. But thank you very much for taking the time here. And I know you're a very busy guy. So.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. I do need to join this. This other meeting, but
okay.
Yeah, happy to follow up and do another. Right. Talk more about how do people get on these boards and that's a whole
special on that. That'd be great. Okay, yeah. Max. Thank you very much. Okay. And bye to everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.